Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. Initially, we were just neighbors who moved to a new neighborhood around the same time. The six of us were about the same age. My wife Claudine was 6 months pregnant when we moved in, and the couple across the street, Sal and Carrie, had a 2-year-old child. As you can imagine, over the years, when all the moms had children of the same age, our wives became close friends, and we guys were pretty close too. After 5 years of living in our small company, there were 7 children. Thanks to mentoring, the parent committee, school events, pool parties, and the like, we almost became one big family. Our children became friends, but even in 20 years, there was no romantic relationship between them. So at 49, I was the oldest in our company, and Carrie's 42 years made her the youngest. Everyone else's age was somewhere in the middle. Ginny and Jeff had 3 children, 2 of whom were in college, and the youngest son was in high school. The twin girls Carrie and Sal were in high school. Our eldest daughter Chelsea studied at Penn State University, and our son Devin joined the Navy after school. So now we were empty nests. All the wives eventually returned to work. When we moved to the area, all our families were experiencing financial difficulties, as were most young couples. Now, to one degree or another, we were all financially secure. My Claudine is a nurse practitioner and works for a large medical organization in our area. Carrie works as an accountant for a lumber supply company, and Ginny opened her own flower shop after working in a small store whose owners decided to retire. Just a piece of middle America. Some are Democrats, some are Republicans. All of us, at least nominally, were Christians with the exception of Sal and Carrie, who regularly attended Catholic Mass. All of us who were Christians went to services at Christmas, Easter, and on special occasions. We were all sincere friends and enjoyed each other's company. Over the years, we have learned to avoid talking about politics and religion, except for the most general topics. It's not that we didn't have other friends and acquaintances, both in the neighborhood and beyond, but we were a tight-knit group. As time passed and our children grew up, the dependence on each other decreased, and we gradually moved on to other relationships. It was something that changed with a decrease in the need to share responsibility for participating in the parent committee, taking children to sports or school events, or having to help each other with babysitting duties. At some point, we realized that we were moving away from each other, and although I do not know who suggested it, we decided to get together on the first and third Fridays of every month for a poker night. We didn't always play poker. Sometimes it was canasta. We tried to play bridge, but none of us had the enthusiasm to succeed in it. Our wives, being the best organizers, constantly changed the topics of meetings. We had dinners with international cuisine, culinary competitions with chili, trivial classes, classical cinema evenings, and even the old backup option, charades. No one ever drank too much, but neither of us was a tea lover, so those who hosted the guests had a sufficient supply of wine, beer, and liqueur. Despite the fact that we were intimately acquainted with each other, there was little or no flirtation between us. Random jokes don't count from time to time. Love was not a topic of discussion, unless it was a story about the latest escapade of a politician or celebrity. All our wives were still attractive, a few extra pounds here and there, but they all kept themselves in shape and dressed to emphasize their dignity, without provocation. Of course, I'm biased, but my wife was the hottest in our group, with a height of 163 centimeters, a weight of 52 kilograms, short brown hair, green eyes, and 3 sizes. She was a neighbor girl. We'd been married for almost 26 years, and besides making great love at least twice a week, I could count on the fingers of one hand the number of serious fights we'd had over the years. No, our love life has not decreased. Everything was cool until a month ago when I visited a client for a quarterly audit. I am a private accountant specializing in working with small and medium-sized corporate clients. Most of my clients have less than 10 million gross income, and I visit their offices every 3 months to check their general books, prepare state and federal tax returns, and check employee insurance. I was in the office of Max Tolson, one of my oldest clients, whom I considered a friend. He and his late wife Sylvia have been to our house for parties many times, and we have been to his house. Max was not in the office when I arrived at his place of work, and his accountant, Louise, arranged for me in the conference room so that I could start my work. Max appeared around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and, absorbed in his work, I barely noticed how he sat down opposite me at a large conference table. Max is a fat, sociable man in his 60s, and I've always enjoyed his company. He has an irreverent attitude towards many things, and especially politicians, so our conversations usually included contempt for almost all elected officials, local, state, and federal. When I realized that he was sitting across from me, I looked up and smiled in greeting. When he spoke, he seemed sad and hesitant. "Charlie, I'm so sorry for you and Claudine. I thought you guys were rock solid." I looked at him questioningly. My curiosity was aroused, but I was sure that everything he thought he knew was a mistake. "So what did you hear?" I asked with a grin. He looked confused as he continued. "Damn, did I just make a mistake?" It was a rhetorical question, but I answered it. "Max, what did you hear? What made you think my family wasn't strong?" Judging by the expression on his face, it seemed that if he had an ejector switch, he would fly through the ceiling and fly out through the roof. "Max," I continued patiently, "we've been friends for many years. What exactly did you hear, and from whom did you hear it?" Finally, he took a deep breath and asked, "Are you and Claudine okay? Are you together? Not getting divorced or something like that?" I just shook my head. "Damn it," he cried, "me and my big fucking mouth." "Listen, Charlie, forget I said anything. I'm an asshole and I probably got the names mixed up. I'm getting old, you know. Sometimes I walk into a room and forget why the hell I went in there. I know that in order to take something, but I will be used if I remember what exactly." Max's repertoire of expressions goes back to the time when he was just starting his business and regularly got his hands dirty. But I understood that he was just stalling. Max still didn't convince me because he wasn't stupid or forgetful. "Come on, Max, don't talk nonsense," I said a little more decisively than I had intended. My initial surprise at his question turned into something close to suspicion. "Good. Okay. Anyway, it probably doesn't mean anything," he said dismissively, waving his hand. "Actually, I didn't hear anything." Before I could object to what was another delaying tactic, he continued. "I had some problems with high blood pressure, and my doctor changed my prescription and made me visit him twice a week so that he could control my blood pressure. He's one of those doctors who works in the same office as your wife. Almost a month ago, there was just such a visiting day. I was waiting at the reception when the doctor walked past me. 'Son of a bitch,' he said, not addressing anyone and looking away. Anyway, the girl at the table eventually called my name and told me to go to room D. They say that the doc will be here in a minute. I'm a little hard of hearing, but too proud to admit it, but I was pretty sure she said D. All the doors were closed, so when I came to the door marked D, I slowly opened it to look inside before entering. I didn't want to go into some poor bastard who had a gloved finger shoved up his ass. Anyway, he sighed resignedly, that's when I saw them. I mean, I saw Claudine and some guy in the green pajamas that all patients wear in hospitals and doctors' offices these days. I like it when you know who's who right away. Doctors wear a 3/4 length tie with a white coat, and they have a stethoscope around their neck. The nurses have starched white uniforms with a cap from the nursing school. The nurses' assistants wear pajamas, and the cleaners look like janitors. With current political correctness, it's better to know who's probing your private parts. Max stalled again, and it was clear from his expression that he didn't want to continue. My heart was pounding, but I said as calmly as I could, "Max, it looks like what you saw is not what I want to hear, but I need to hear it. You've opened a can of worms, and there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle." Trying to squeeze out a little levity, which I certainly didn't feel, I added, "Max, I know this is awkward for you, but I promise not to shoot the messenger." "Oh, damn it," he proclaimed. "They didn't hear me click the door." I can tell you, Charlie, I almost pooped in my pants. Apparently, Max thought he had fulfilled his obligation to fully disclose information, but I was by no means going to be content with him covering up something as serious as this, so I insisted. "Max, did you see them kissing? Did she kiss him on the lips? Were they hugging each other? Did you kiss with tongues? Were their bodies locked together? What did it look like? Give me something, Max." "Damn it," he exclaimed. "Yes, they were kissing, and they were pretty close to each other." And he put his hand under her blouse, whatever it was called. It all looked like it was more than just a kiss on the lips. As far as I could tell, he was a young guy with curly brown hair in his early 30s. I didn't get a close look at him. Closing the door behind me, I returned to the reception, where I was told that it was room B and not D, which I was supposed to be in. When my doctor came in, my fucking blood pressure was 240 over 122. He even wanted to put me in a fucking hospital, God forbid. Later, when I thought about what I saw, I thought that you guys must be splitting up, so I opened my big mouth. I have no idea how long I was sitting there with my head down when I felt Max standing behind me and massaging my shoulders with his hands. He bent down and said in a soft voice, "Charlie, I want to tell you something I've never told other people. Something that makes me very ashamed. I loved my Sylvia with all my heart and soul. When she died, I wanted to die too, to be with her. However, we are all human beings and we all make mistakes. About 20 years ago, I was at a congress. My business started to gain momentum and I had money in my pocket. I felt like I was on top of the world. I was young. Booze and hormones were pouring in, and I invited a woman I met there. We spent the whole night together. She was married, attended another congress, and if my life depended on it, I wouldn't be able to tell you her name, or even what she looked like. All I remember is that I woke up alone with a splitting headache and the memory of what I had done. I, big cool Max, cried into my pillow from my own betrayal. If there is a God in heaven, I know that Sylvia will find out what I did. I just pray that she forgives me and we can be together again. Listen to Charlie. What I saw may have been nothing more than a one-time flirtation, a moment of human weakness. Please think about it before you do anything." Now tears were streaming from my eyes, which I tried unsuccessfully to hide, and I reached over my shoulder, patted Max's hand, and said in a trembling voice, "I don't think I can stay here and continue working. My mind is occupied with something else entirely now." In a booming voice, more like the Max I've known all these years, he bellowed, "To hell with taxes, to hell with a corrupt, blood-sucking government. Get out of here, you'll do it another time." I thought long and hard about what Max said about human weakness, and although kissing and groping alone cannot be an obstacle to our marriage, I believed in the old proverb, "There is no smoke without fire." After I left Max and knowing that Claudine was at work, I went straight home. Deciding to play detective, I looked into the drawers in search of underwear that I hadn't seen before. I even checked the laundry basket for panties that might have any marks on them. After half an hour of fruitless digging, I gave up. It was clear that if there was any evidence, it would be in her purse or in her phone. My wife works from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. When she came home, she found me in the kitchen putting the finishing touches to the food I'd prepared. There was an open bottle of Chardonnay on the table. She kissed me on the lips and poured herself some wine. Our conversation at dinner was a little slurred because I couldn't get the image of what Max had described out of my head. After dinner, we watched TV, mostly in silence. Even Claudine noticed the change in my behavior. She didn't say anything. When we finally went to bed, Claudine disappeared into her dressing room and came out wearing my favorite purple teddy bear and smelling of my favorite perfume. After stroking him for a minute or two, she said, It looks like my little friend doesn't want to play. I'll have to fix it." I was probably just being paranoid, but her term little friend wasn't exactly inspiring to me. My wife never speaks during love. I don't mean that she doesn't make noise. It's just that Claudine is not the kind of woman who expresses her moments in words. I was my own boss, so I decided to go to the office a little later the next morning. Claudine kissed me passionately before jumping into the shower to get ready for her shift. She went to the bathroom naked, and I couldn't help but admire her beautiful ass. I prayed that she wouldn't share it with anyone else. I was in a more relaxed mood when I went downstairs to put the coffee on. No doubt the previous night of passion helped to dispel my paranoia a little. Maybe it was just a one-time moment of weakness, I thought. After all, it was almost a month ago when Max was in her office, and how could a woman who confessed that she loved me and showed such unbridled passion just a few hours ago have a lover on the side? Besides, I thought, when does she have time for a lover? Okay, a kiss and a quick grope in an empty examination room, but certainly not full-fledged love in a busy medical room. She never worked late, there were no girls' parties, there was no bowling alley, nothing. All this may be due to hasty conclusions from nothing. I tried to be optimistic, but I realized that even a simple kiss and letting another man caress her breasts was something. At this last thought, Claudine entered the kitchen dressed in her scrubs, and I saw how easily her breasts were accessible in these loose clothes. If something was going on, I should have known. If something had happened but it was over, well, I guess I would never have known. However, later that morning, I chose a detective agency from the Yellow Pages, which was located near my office, and made an appointment for the same day. On the door was written, A. Mellon, Detective Agency. When I entered the office, I was surprised to see an attractive woman in her 50s. She had gray hair, a beautiful figure, and an unusually large chest that protruded noticeably even from under her jacket. After I introduced myself, she held out her hand and said, "Hi, my name is Ann Mellon." I was immediately embarrassed when an involuntary laugh escaped from my throat. I started to apologize, but she interrupted me, saying in a submissive tone, Yes, don't worry. I've been getting ridiculed since I was 16. I found out that she was a retired NYPD detective and had the same sarcastic wit and cynical demeanor that was often shown on television police shows. After I explained why I came to her and what I needed to know, she asked me all the relevant questions: age, children, love life, professions, etc. And then asked me a question that I was not ready for and which, frankly, angered me. "Mr. Manza, have you ever cheated on your wife?" She saw the irritation on my face, and when I replied decisively, "Never," she went on to say that she herself had experienced this several times, with different spouses. "Mr. Manza?" "Charlie," I interrupted. "Charlie," she continued. "The reason I had to ask this question is that sometimes a spouse cheats to avenge their partner's real or imagined infidelity. Right now, you have an unsubstantiated claim that a month ago presumably he saw your wife being kissed and touched. On top of that, you told me that she doesn't have the ability to have an illicit relationship, and that your love life at home is good and unchangeable. So, speaking in police language, I'll tell you. However, if you are willing to spend money to calm your mind, of course I am ready to accept it." I signed the contract and paid her a fee. Everything was fine at home. Claudine was as affectionate and cheerful as always, and I was beginning to believe that maybe Max was wrong. By the following Monday, I had not heard from Anne. Realizing that I probably had a few hefty paid hours at work, I decided that I would call her before the end of the day and end the investigation. Right after lunch, Anne called me herself and said in her usual mysterious tone, "Charlie, I'm pretty sure I have everything I need. Could you show up at my office before 5? I have a date today and I don't want to rush to prepare for it." I got to her office at 4:30 p.m. and, to put it mildly, I was a little wary, since she hadn't hinted anything on the phone about the results of her investigation. When I arrived, she motioned for me to sit next to her desk, and although she wasn't warm and fluffy, I noticed a change in her behavior, something that made me a little irritable. Before I could ask anything, she handed me a manila envelope across the table and said in a softer voice, "You know, Charlie, the best thing about this lame job is when I can tell my spouse that he got it all wrong and there's no evidence of infidelity." My sigh of relief was suppressed as she continued, "Unfortunately, this is not one of those cases. This is the case when I hate my job. My heart was racing and I had to force myself to breathe. As for any connection with a colleague, I can't say for sure, since I couldn't walk around the medical office building. However, twice last week, first on Monday, she left work around 1 p.m., presumably for lunch, drove 2 blocks to the apartment complex and entered the studio apartment. She stayed there for a little less than an hour, and no one came out after her, so I waited until she left, and 10 minutes later a man came out of the same apartment, got into a car, and drove away. It looks like this was not the guy your friend described, as he was about 40 years old and had gray hair. On Tuesday and Wednesday, she went to lunch with a colleague, but on Thursday she followed the same routine as on Monday. Again, she stayed in the apartment for about an hour, but this time they left together, and before she got into the car, they exchanged more than a casual kiss. The apartment was on the ground floor, and unlike last time, there was a large enough hole in the curtains for me to take some photos while they were inside. All relevant data is in the report, including time-stamped photos of them in the apartment, her comings and goings, their kisses, and his personal information, which I obtained from his license plate and cross-checking the apartment rental information. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "Charlie, I'm going to give you some unsolicited but good advice. Do not open the envelope. Just give it to your lawyer, if divorce is the way you intend to go." After a pause, she continued, "But I know you won't take my advice. I didn't listen to myself when it happened to me. Each of us has some kind of masochistic streak that only makes the pain worse. I'm telling you the cliché of the cliché, but it's true. Sometimes good people do bad things, but that doesn't necessarily make them bad people. Do yourself a favor. Make it as painless as possible for yourself and your family. Revenge eats the soul." She came out from behind the table when I got up, trying to hold back tears, kissed me on the cheek, and, no longer looking like a policeman, said, "Please don't do anything stupid, Charlie. I know you're in pain. I've been in this situation too, but life doesn't stand still, and time heals all wounds. I went back to my office and wrote to Claudine before opening the envelope. I have problems at work with the audit, which is due to be presented tomorrow. I'll be late. Don't wait. The last words stuck in my throat, but their absence would have been quite obvious. Love, Charlie. I think we all have masochistic tendencies, because I did the exact opposite of what my detective recommended. I opened the envelope. The report was quite detailed, with names, dates, length of stay, and a very general description of what was on the CD. Anne called it a love encounter. Hesitantly and with trembling fingers, I inserted the disc into the player, and after about 10 minutes of watching all the footage, I did the following, which Anne had warned me about. I started planning my revenge. When I returned home and entered our bedroom, Claudine was asleep, watching her breasts rise and fall, her brown hair framing her face on the pillow, and the seemingly peaceful innocence of her sleep. I wondered what went wrong. For a moment I thought maybe I should talk to her. If we go to a psychologist, maybe we can save the marriage. No amount of counseling, no amount of tears could wash away the image of her kneeling on the bed, clutching the headboard, and her head tipping back as he used her. How long, I asked myself, has this been going on? How many others has she betrayed me with? To tell the truth, I didn't want to know. The answers could only serve to further torment my already broken heart. When I woke up in the morning after a restless night's sleep, Claudine was not in bed. There was the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting up the stairs from the kitchen. This smell used to bring me comfort and a sense of security, but now it has turned my stomach. Claudine was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and finishing her yogurt, when she saw me coming into the kitchen. She looked at me with concern and asked, "Are you all right, baby? Have you been tossing and turning all night?" "Yes," I replied. "Just an upset stomach. I'm all right now." She was relieved, but I didn't know if it was because I was feeling better, or because she was happy that my anxiety wasn't caused by my suspicions of her cheating. Anyway, she said cheerfully, "Don't forget that we're having a poker night this Friday. The girls and I thought it would be a pursuit race. What do you think?" At that moment, a vague plan came to my mind, and I said, "I have a better idea. I want to have an evening, you know, by changing the situation a little." "Good," she said with a grin. "Unless it has to do with us girls being topless." "Don't worry, dear," I said sarcastically. "I wouldn't want my wife to flaunt herself to anyone, not even our friends." With the same sarcasm, she replied, "Really? I think I've seen you check Ginny's cleavage more than once." Forcing myself to laugh, I said, "Well, there's a big difference between a look and a touch." Apparently, my comment again missed her head, because she put her cup in the sink and kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. My plan was under development. I spent several hours that day getting what I needed, and a couple of hours the next day gathering the necessary data and materials needed to make my plan work. In fact, I've come up with a great concept, and if it didn't involve such terrible consequences, I could probably sell it. I managed to avoid making love with my wife on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, but on Thursday, when we went to bed, Claudine did not accept my no as an answer. She was wearing only an old t-shirt and looked very beautiful. From the moment we first began our lovemaking, Claudine has been exceptional at making me feel good. I knew that my wife had not learned this skill from books, and as far as I knew, there were no instructions on this art. But that was before we met, and I wasn't a flower in a flower bed either. Despite my reluctance, she quickly achieved her goal. On Friday, after our friends arrived, we settled down in the living room, enjoying cocktails and some prepackaged snacks that I bought at the supermarket. The conversation was light, mostly about our kids, work, neighborhood events, and the like. Ginny looked beautiful. Showing off her cleavage, she turned to me. "So, Charlie, I heard that you've come up with a new game for us tonight. Are we girls going to see something new?" "Exactly," I replied. "I think the game is very interesting, and I spent quite a lot of time organizing it. We'll go to the dining room. There are nameplates in every place. There are also paper and pens for each player. Since I came up with the game and know the answers, I will be the moderator and timekeeper. The plates show the numbers from 1 to 10. Moreover, each number has 4 subsections, A, B, C, and D. I will pass 10 pictures one at a time, and each player will have 30 seconds to write down their answers. Then you need to transfer the picture to the person sitting to his right. The photos show couples, some famous, some not so famous. Each question is rated at 4 points. So, let's say the photo shows Laurel and Hardy. The player gets all 4 points if he knows both the first and last name of each of them. For example, If this person knows only last names, he gets 2 points. If he knows Stan Laurel but doesn't remember that Hardy's name is Oliver, he gets 3 points. In other words, for each name, first and last, there is 1/2 point. If Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall were in the photo, but the player could only remember Humphrey Bogart and not his partner in the film, he would receive only 1 point for the entire round. Any questions? Oh, and all the pictures have a theme associated with them. Anyone can shout out what they think about the topic at any time. However, if you make a mistake, you lose a point for every wrong guess. If you are right, 2 points will be added to your final score. I arranged the seats so that Claudia sat at the head of the table. I'm on her right. Jeff was sitting on my right, and his wife Ginny was sitting next to him on the same side of the table. Carrie's seat was opposite Ginny's. To her right sat her husband Sal, and to his right, closing the circle, sat Claudine. All the games we had played so far were becoming unnecessary, and everyone seemed to be full of enthusiasm that this could be something uniquely challenging. Remember, I warned, do not let your neighbor see the picture, as this will give him an advantage in the form of extra time. The game started, and I handed the first photo to Jeff face down and hit the stopwatch. I started with what I thought were the simplest of them, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. I saw Jeff smiling as he wrote down his answers for 10 seconds. After I called the time, he pushed the photo face down to Carrie, who seemed less confident than her husband. She wrote something down, and after a 5-second pause, she looked a little upset when she turned the photo over and moved it further. When the photo finally reached Claudine, she seemed pleased and quickly wrote down her answers. The next photo was with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver. Everyone seemed to be confident in their answers. The third photo showed Al Gore and Tipper Gore, and it took the players a little longer, as it was probably a little harder to remember Mrs. Gore's name. It was followed by a photo of Jerry Lewis and Patty Lewis. They had been married for 38 years, but even I wouldn't have had the slightest idea about her name if I hadn't found it on the internet. After that, there was Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, which everyone seemed to like. The next shot was difficult. Reba McEntire and Narvel Blackstock. There were a lot of good-natured complaints like, come on, it's not fair, who the hell recognizes them? Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston brought smiles to everyone's faces. Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes caused a similar reaction. At that moment, Jeff, who seemed the most confident, declared, I want to try the theme. I'm sorry, Jeff, I said, doing my best to mimic the foghorn used in old game shows. The following photos featured Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, as well as Mickey Hargitay and Jane Mansfield. Everyone leaned back in their chairs, and there were a lot of comments about how well I did in creating the game. We're not done yet, I declared. I have a bonus picture, and a 3-point bonus will be awarded for each correct answer, but you only have 5 seconds. Everyone seemed thrilled to be able to score more points, but I was in no hurry to show the photo to Jeff, who had a confident smile on his face. When he turned it over, his smile disappeared, and he did not reach for the pen. He just sat and stared at the painting with a blank expression on his face. Sal laughed and said, Wow, this must be hard. I hit the stopwatch and said in a commanding voice, Time's up, Jeff. Pass the photo to Ginny. Without turning it face down, he handed the photo to Ginny, who was looking at him with a triumphant smile due to the fact that he could not identify the people in the photo. When she finally looked down and saw a selection of 4 pictures on a 20x25 centimeter sheet, she gasped, dropped the photo, and covered her mouth with her hand. One shot showed Claudine on all fours in bed and being used. The next one showed Claudine with her legs spread and a man's head buried between her legs. The man's recognizable face was clearly visible in all the photos, except for one in which he was buried between my wife's legs. Time, Ginny. Give Carrie a chance, I said cheerfully. She looked at me sadly but did not move to hand over the photo. Carrie laughed and said, Come on, give the others a chance. She stretched out her hand and pulled the photo towards her. Carrie stared at the images blankly and seemed to have no emotion, but eventually reached to the middle of the table and, taking a glass bowl with onion sauce, screamed, You're a fucking fool! She threw the bowl in Sal's face. Sal was knocked off his chair and tried to wipe the onion sauce and blood that sprayed from his nose, from his eyes and from his face. Jeff and Ginny stoically watched the scene unfold, while Claudine stood there looking stunned. Sal tried to stand up and screamed, What the fuck? Carrie grabbed the photos Claudine was looking at in shock from the table and shoved them in her husband's face, growling, "It's what the fuck, you slimy piece of shit." With that, she kicked him. When Sal curled up in the fetal position, Carrie walked around the table, went to Claudine, who hugged herself and sobbed softly, and hit her in the face so hard that my wife staggered and broke a porcelain vase. Carrie turned and, looking contemptuously at her moaning husband, hissed, "Don't even think about going home, you unfaithful bastard. Not tonight, not ever." Then she left the room. Except for Claudine's hoarse sobs, the room was dead silent until I muttered, "By the way, the theme of tonight was divorced couples. Andy."